He's one of the world's leading authorities on disability equality.
Leaving out over 1 billion people that live with a disability just doesn't make economic sense. I'm Victor Pineda, investor, philanthropist, social impact entrepreneur.
His goal is to promote equality, to dismantle barriers and open up the world in a way that allows everyone to reach their dream.
We can have a huge impact and build a world where everybody belongs.
Victor, thanks so much for joining us on the dialogue. Your mission is about making life better for others, but you've also had your own challenges. You grew up in Venezuela, and you famously once said that the impact of how people treated you was more significant than any physical obstacle you've ever had to overcome.
Well, I stopped walking when I was about 5 or 6 years old, due to a very rare condition that made my muscles weak. At the same time, I realized that it made my determination strong. It made my family strong. It made other people see me in a new way. The challenge was just that there's an old way of thinking. That confronting a world that wasn't designed for me, a world that wasn't built for me, created a lot of obstacles. That obstacles are not only architectural, but the legacy infrastructure that does not take into account human difference. So the biggest challenge growing up was confronting a school system in Venezuela that would literally not want to educate a child, would see this child as a liability.
When people are excluded from education, it obviously has a huge impact on the individual. But what impact does it have on society, Victor?
I think the biggest impact is we realize that life is rich, diverse, and interesting when we have different life experiences. And I think the classroom is a place to build up civic values, to build up a sense of belonging, a sense of community. But ultimately, when you look at the economics, we're looking at a $2 trillion economic loss by excluding people with disabilities from the workforce.
And I've heard you talk about your family, where you said you've talked about things like the joy of your brothers beating you up and some things.
We would wrestle.
Wrestle. Can you tell us more about that?
Of course. I think children are playful and they're curious, but they're all special. The challenge is when we treat some children more special than others, or we look at labels as a way to protect or coddle or, in a sense, isolate. And I think the opportunity is to look at the contrary, which is, considering your child's particular aptitudes and their interests. How do they have a deep way to experience the richness of life?
You're here in Doha, Qatar, to take part in the My Disability Justice series for Doha Debates. You're going to be talking about radical inclusion. Can you tell us something about that philosophy?
Well, we're having a global perspective. Got all these social impact leaders that happen to have a disability. They're each changing the world in their own ways.
I want to live in a world where people could have easy and affordable access to assistive technologies,
where people with disabilities are more represented in the performing arts,
where parents have the tools and resources to advocate for their deaf children.
The world is changing so fast, and there's so much polarization and also inequality that for the majority of people with disabilities, there is very little hope and very little resources and very little sense of social cohesion. The question becomes, how do we look at a place that could be resource poor or underinvested and yet still see a thriving, community of people with disabilities?
I suppose the one advantage to mandates and quotas, if you like, is that at least it's straightforward to implement. And if we don't go for that type of option, then it's going to be complex and difficult, and I guess that doesn't put you off.
We have been looking at these issues, at least in the modern sense, since the 70s. And that's over 50 years of, trials and errors in terms of calibrating public policies and investments, opportunities from the public sector to engage and include people with visual impairments, hearing impairments, people that might have difficulty moving around without assistance. So the question isn't so much about what kind of quotas we have to mandate, but how do we create an ecosystem where everybody feels like they belong, where there is direct and personalized support, where individuals are judged based on their unique talents and contributions.
So when you look at politics, education, policymakers, what is it that we're getting right and what is it that we're getting wrong?
I think we're getting a lot of things right now. The pandemic really changed the perspective about who's included, who's confined, who's excluded, how do we create bridges. We're looking at a major surge in employment rates. And the disability community has been asking for remote work for decades. And corporate world kept saying it's impossible, we can't do it. It's going to be too disruptive, and everybody switched over. It's the course of a week. Now, what we're getting wrong is we continue to perpetuate ideas of charity, of pity, of let me figure that out for you, let me do this for you. We really want an opportunity to feel like the world can be redesigned in a way that unlocks everybody's potential. Those design interventions aren't rocket science. They just require technical skills with the right partnerships to be able to unlock your organizations.
Victor, you once bragged that there isn't anything you felt you couldn't do. Do you still feel that way?
I mean, we're all faced with limitations, but there's an opportunity to have hope, courage, and ultimately love, and the people around you create those conditions for you to step into a place where you feel like you can do anything. But, we each have to confront those challenges ourselves.
Victor, thank you so much for joining us on The Dialogue.
Thank you, Guy, for having me.